Solomon says a good name is more precious than fine gold or silver. How does a person get a good name anyway? And what is a good name? Thank you for tuning in today. I hope this message will be helpful as we continue our journey through Ecclesiastes. A good name is better than fine perfume. The day of one's death is better than the day of birth. It is better to go to a house of mourning than to a house of feasting. For death is the destiny of everyone. The living should take this to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, because a sad face is good for the heart. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of the fool is in the house of pleasure. It is better to heed a wise man's rebuke than to listen to the songs of fools. Like the crackling of thorns under the pot, so is the laughter of fools. This too is meaningless. Exhortation turns a wise man into a fool, and a bribe corrupts the heart. The end of a matter is better than its beginning, and patience is better than pride. Do not be quickly provoked in your spirit, for anger resides in the lap of fools. Do not say, why were the old days better than these? For it is not wise to ask such questions. Wisdom, like an inheritance, is a good thing, and benefits those who see the sun. This is the word of God for us, the people of God. You know, I want to, one of the things about the greatest generation, however you want to define that, is respect. And a lot of the folks in my dad's generation we had great respect for. Not everybody, obviously. But I was around a lot of people who showed great courage, who were World War II veterans. And a lot of those guys wouldn't talk about the war for a variety of reasons. One of which was they didn't want to relive it. Another one was they were humble. And in particular, in today's world, with the wars that went on in Afghanistan and Iraq, those who received the highest medals, Medal of Honor, typically were so humble as recipients, they would deflect the praise they would get, and they would say, this belongs to my entire unit, which is true. But it wasn't given to them because they were not deserving. Respect is a big deal. And how do we earn respect? I think it's important for us to know how do we earn respect? Sometimes people are respected based on their title. I serve on the Judicial Standards Commission. I go into a conference room, and there sits a couple of people who serve on the North Carolina Court of Appeals. I don't call them by their first name. I respect their role. On the other hand, let me mention a situation I had years ago. Governor Perdue was in my church in Newbern. She came often. Not as often as I would have liked, but she came often. When she came in and I served her communion, I called her Beverly. When we went outside, I called her Governor Perdue. And she loved that distinction. I didn't have to explain why I was doing that. She got it. It's important for us to realize that some people get respect based on their title, based on their role in the community. But that's not always the case. First of all, a good reputation is a better choice than riches. Esteem is more valuable than money. A good reputation. And how does a person gain a good reputation? That's an important thing, is it not? Well, there are several ways we look at that. First of all, to get a good reputation, we need to realize that it's built on the heart and not on the look. Let me say, with all due respect to my training as a psychologist, if you will, a marriage counselor, with all due respect to that, sometimes a person's origins and early life development create a lifelong issue as it relates to affect. We see people that appear to be haughty, people that appear to be arrogant or prideful. But that affect is also mostly determined by the time a person is 5 years old or younger. So how dare we hold that against them, if you will? A person's heart is what God sees. And I have been put in my place many, many times by prejudging someone and then getting to know them and finding out their story, if you will. It's just not how often appears. 1 Samuel says, "But the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him." The Lord does not look at the things man looks at. Man looks at the outward appearance. God looks at the heart. Understanding that a good reputation begins there. The first point I want to make is a good reputation begins with speaking the truth. Respected people do not tell lies, Proverbs says. Now, let me say how I was raised. And I believe it's still the best path for our understanding. Lying, by definition, in my household growing up, was the intent to deceive. Whether you told an outright lie or not, it was whether you intended to pull one over on somebody. And we know that is not often embraced today. I think today people believe truth is whatever you get away with. I have seen that degradation in our culture for the last 30 years or more, 40 years. But it's important that we understand the greatest generation, truthfulness was a big component of how they lived their lives. My granddaddy, as an example, was born 1897, and he would have done $1 million deal with somebody over a handshake. He did a big deal one time over a handshake. He and his brothers bought a building and loan over a handshake. And it's important to realize that truthfulness is always the best policy. And sometimes it's hard to know how to say the truth. And sometimes what happens is people who are, I think, suffering from low self-esteem or lack of trust in their ability will hedge on the truth because they don't have confidence in the truth itself. And the truth is always the truth. And it's never right to do wrong to do right. And our culture does not embrace that very much anymore, as I see it. Proverbs 25:15, "Like clouds and wind without rain is a man who boasts of gifts he does not give." Wow. The man of integrity walks securely. Knowing integrity is a quality that permeates around certain people. This person has integrity. And that's a hard thing to get, and it's a very easy thing to lose. Respect begins with telling the truth. Respect also includes serving with respect. You know, our culture today, lots of aspects of our culture we need to be thinking about. But one is being respectful. When we want respect, we need to be respectful, right? Proverbs 14:22 says, "You will earn the trust and respect of others if you work for good." Proverbs 11:27, "If your goals are good, you'll be respected." Respect is something that is earned over time and, as I mentioned, can be destroyed in a hurry. What do I mean serving with respect? What I mean with serving with respect is serving with humility, serving with sacrifice, serving in a way that is respectful of the people we serve. I have enjoyed watching some TikTok videos. I don't have a TikTok account and never will have one. But one of the TikTok videos I watched recently was really amazing. This guy sitting on the corner, he looks like he doesn't have a dime to his name. And people just ignore him and walk by him and walk by him and walk by him. 25 people walk by him. And one young lady has a bottle of water in her hand, sits down to have a conversation with him. And that conversation went on for quite a while. And as she got up to leave, the guy handed her an envelope with $10,000 in cash in it and said, "I was waiting to give this away to someone who would sit and talk with me." Wow. Respect. Respecting the people we serve and understanding that, but for the grace of God, there I go, right? That's often the case. My next point, if you will, is staying clear of gossip. Matthew says it this way: if your brother sins against you, go and show him his fault, just between the two of you. If he listens to you, you've won the brother over. But if he will not listen, take 2 others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell the entire church. And if he refuses to listen to the entire church, treat that person as a pagan or a tax collector. Wow. There's a principle involved in this. And the principle involved is you address your complaints, your concerns with the person you have a complaint or concern with, instead of telling everybody else. And that's often how churches roll. I've jokingly said, I don't have an axe to grind today, so don't hear that. I'm not concerned about anybody's gossip at this point. I haven't heard any. But then I have to understand I'm 6 weeks after the curve. In my life, if I do something that creates conflict, I don't get to hear about it for about 6 weeks. It has to circle through the entire church before it comes back to me. But that being said, gossip does not serve anybody well, and people who gossip will never be respected at the end of the day. And that's the bottom line. Now, you're begging for a story, so I will give you one. A number of years ago, I had a young first-time person on staff parish. He'd never served on staff parish before. And he called me up and he said, staff parish is a personnel committee. He called me up and said, I want to have lunch. I've got some concerns. Oh, okay, cool, let's have lunch. So I invited the chair of staff parish to go to lunch with us. And I called this guy back and said, would it be okay if so-and-so went with us? He said, yeah. I get to lunch. We're at a Mexican restaurant. After the chips are gone, the chip chat with the chip time. This guy approached. He said, John, several people have said to my wife, whatever. I said, hold the phone. Hold the phone. I love you too much to allow you to get involved in triangles, because triangles are always destructive. Can I get a witness? Triangles are always destructive. Well, that's mighty anemic. The point is, triangles never go well. And I said to this guy, I said, listen, I love you too much to allow this to happen. And hear me in love when I tell you what I said to him. I said, I don't really give a rip what your wife thinks. I don't care. I do, however, care what you think, because you're the guy on this committee. Your job is not to bring stated concerns to me that you've heard chit-chat about. Your job is to filter those concerns and tell me what you think. That's where you're on the committee. And later, the other guy at the dinner came. I read this passage of scripture to him, and the other guy at lunch that day said, absolutely, that's what we need to do. Why is that from my point of view? I can say this now because, like I said, I don't have any axe to grind with anybody at this point in the church life, if you will. But my point is, hear me from my heart. I need to hear from you if you have a concern. And what I'm saying is this. Let me tell you flat out how I roll in this. I don't have enough emotional energy to spend my life wondering what other people think. I just don't do that. And it's important for us to live that way. All of us live that way. So that when you go to bed at night, you don't have to be paranoid about who said what to somebody else, and so forth and so on. You don't have to have a great memory at that point. But it's important to realize that triangles always end badly. And most of the time, 2 of the 3 of the people in the triangle end up with their feelings hurt. Stay clear of gossip. Run from gossip. And if you have somebody that wants to give you some gossip, stop them in their tracks and say, hold the phone. That is gossip. I don't want to hear it. I've got a situation now I've got to work with a guy who's a pastor that I know. There's gossip going around his church that came to me about some bad thing that's happened in his church. And I'm going to have lunch with him, and I'm going to say, listen, you need to hear this. And if it's not true, I'm going to go back down the trail and find out who started it for you. And I'm going to tell them it's not true. I have that much confidence in this guy and that much concern about his well-being. Does that make sense? My next point is, If you want to earn respect, share with generosity. Share with generosity. A number of years ago, a story is told of a guy who was very philanthropic. And he was standing at a graveside and wanted to eulogize the guy who had passed on. And he began his eulogy by saying, "Brother Bill stood by me in medical school. I couldn't have paid the rent. He paid my rent. He paid my utilities. He helped my wife and myself out every month for the 4 years I was in medical school. I'm so grateful. And from his example, I learned to pay it forward." A dentist steps up to the microphone and says, "You know, Brother Bill did that for me too. He took care of all of our expenses, tuition-wise and room and board. He paid everything. He was so generous. I'll never forget it." Then the next guy stood up and said, "As you might know, I'm an attorney. And Bill helped me all the time. I think I better write a check to him." You know, he can't cash that check. You get that? Right. It just wasn't funny, right? Anyway, the point is, generosity always is recognizable in people. Generosity is a quality that builds respect in our community, in our church, around all of us. And I'll say this about generosity. I've had lots of conversations over the years about how do you know when to help somebody and how to help somebody. Because people will take advantage of you. Is that true? You bet. From my point of view, when it comes to somebody on the corner wanting help, I try to have in my possession some McDonald's gift certificates. And if somebody says they're hungry, I try to hand them a McDonald's gift certificate. And if they get haughty and refuse it, I go, "Well, I just learned what I need to know." If they accept that McDonald's gift certificate with generosity or graciously, sometimes I will follow up with a Food Line gift card. Because that tells you a lot about people. And let me say this about that. I am certain that I'm wrong a lot of the time. I am certain of that. There are times when I help people that don't need to be helped. I'm probably buying drugs or whatever else out there. I know that. There are times none of us are going to bat 1,000. But at the end of the day, if I offer a gift card to somebody who says they're hungry, I can sleep better at night knowing I did that. And I think that's a good practice to have. I have no idea what the formula is for anybody else, and I'm often guilty of violating my own formula. So how about that for honesty? It's important to realize generosity is a big deal. And when you go to bed at night, generosity will help you sleep well. My next point is we succeed with humility. Arrogance will bring your downfall, but if you're humble, you'll be respected. Jesus talked about humility. Paul talked about humility. Here's a partial verse I'd like to quote for you today, and I always get it wrong, but I'll try to get it close. Jesus said these words: "Walk in humility. Live in humility." Paul said it this way: "Humble yourselves, therefore, under the almighty hand of God." And here's what I think he means by that. What he means by that is live according to Scripture. And what happens often, as I said earlier, a person's affect can be so off-putting we think they're not humble. But humility is how a person sees himself before God and how they, even at great cost, will listen to God and do what God says do, even if it's going to cost them something. To me, that's what humility is. It's not how we look. It's not how a person walks down the street, bebop or not bebop, whatever. It's how that person sees himself before God and how that person is willing to put other people first. That's humility. I hope you can see the connection with this sermon today about what we read in Ecclesiastes and the video. Humility, respect, generosity, all this is very, very valuable commodities in our life today. Thank you for tuning in to Horns Church today. If this message on getting respect or earning respect has been helpful, give us a call at 252-237-4616. We'd be glad to talk with you about this or anything related to your spiritual journey. God bless you and have a great week.